according to Dr. Shanahan, then how do we pick what we eat and why? So maybe you can share with us her recommendations.
Yeah, so she has what she calls the 4 pillars of health. So the first one is bone-in meat. So eating meat or cooking meat, roasting meat on the bone. And then she has the second pillar, organs, third pillar, fermented or sprouted foods, and then the fourth pillar, fresh foods. So yeah, a little bit about the bone-in meat. I think that a lot of this and a lot of all the other pillars of health, they really, I guess, capture just eating natural foods and whole foods. And so a little bit about what she talks about in the render section on eating meat on the bone is that, getting all the extra nutrients that are in the bones. And so I guess one of the ways that we do this is we like to drink bone broth, or we like to make bone broth at home. Sometimes we'll do, like, if we roast chicken, then we'll just save the bones and then like make a bone broth afterwards, or we'll get like pork bones or beef bones and then just boil that, and then just boil that for hours and then just make a bone broth at home.
I always go to the market and pick up bones. So it's easy here in Taiwan. Just walk out to the local market and just grab these huge pork bones, and they'll cut it up for you and just throw it in a pot with some chicken carcass. You can also buy chicken carcass in the market here. So
it's very nice. Here it's a bit harder to find. They sell like prepackaged like cartons of bone broth, but I don't know. I actually haven't tried any of those before. I always just make it at home, so I'll have to go like to Asian market or more. Like a smaller market, not standard grocery stores here to be able to find bones or just like different parts of the animal, like the organs. Those can be a bit harder to find here too. But her second pillar is organs, eating organ meats, and one of the reasons why is that organ meats are almost like superfoods. They're like there's so much hype surrounding superfoods like goji berries or like different plants, but actually we're finding that organ meats are almost like a hidden, underrepresented superfood. They're very, very nutrient dense. So here's a comparison of how like the micronutrient breakdown of 100 grams of beef liver versus red meat, carrots, and apple. And so
it's huge.
Yeah, you can see that you're actually getting a lot of nutrients, micronutrients in just a 100-gram serving of beef liver. And so it's pretty crazy, but I think that it is difficult for people to eat, and for me even, like I think I'm starting to get used to the taste of liver. I'm just starting, and it's been like at least a couple years. It's definitely an acquired taste, but yeah, it's very good. Very nutrient dense.
Yeah, especially in the B vitamin family, the B, you got listed B6, B12, but also folic acid, biotin. These are all riboflavin. These are all B complex or B family of vitamins. Yeah. So, and this is what most people are lacking. Really lacking, and it's just hard to get enough bioavailable forms of these. Even supplementation, we end up peeing out most of it. It's all like, you take B vitamin complex and your pee turns yellow, right? So it's just you're not really absorbed. But you don't get that when you eat liver. So.
Yeah. So that's another, I guess, another principle in eating foods in nature's package. So like you can look at this in terms of like eating beef liver or like eating a meat product. It will have a little bit of fat in it because the fat and protein usually come together in animal products, and that really helps with the the fat soluble vitamins. And so, naturally, some vitamins are water soluble, some vitamins are fat soluble. And so, eating this in, I guess, the natural package with fat in it helps for absorption or the bioavailability of these micronutrients. So, can be pretty beneficial just to eat it from, I guess, the natural package in meat or organ meats. So.
Yeah, and even vitamin A, right? We always, for our let's say eye health or something like that, we want to get vitamin A, and yeah, just beef has just tremendous amount of bioavailable vitamin A. Yeah, organ meats and heart and so forth as well. I think heart is very rich in coenzyme Q10. Right, eating heart for your heart health, right? Because oftentimes people take CoQ10 supplements for their heart. Well, you can eat a heart and also get very much bioavailable ones.
Yeah, and so I guess moving on to the third pillar, which is fermented foods. So this can really help like your gut bacteria or like digestion, but also just the like absorption or just digestion of these foods, because sometimes like if your gut is not in an optimal state, these foods can be kind of difficult to break down or digest. And so you can kind of almost think of it as like these, if you're eating fermented foods, it's already processed a little bit in the bacteria that, fermented the foods. And so fermented foods could include like kimchi or like yogurt, like kombucha or even sourdough. These are all fermented foods.
So what do you do to get these?
Well, I like to eat kimchi. I like kimchi. And like yogurt. I eat yogurt too. And if I go to Asian market, then like sometimes I'll get like natto too, like the soy, like a soybean, like a fermented soybean thing. Or you could also get it through sauerkraut or So. And
they're not too difficult to make. Yeah.
Yeah. They're not too difficult to make either. So do you want to talk about if any of the foods that you've made, any of the fermented foods?
Yeah, if I'm more on task, I would usually try to make some sort of yogurt. It's very easy to get kimchi here because there are a lot of authentic kimchi that people ferment. I just call them and then we get it delivered, free delivery, and you'll get these jars. So that's pretty easy. Sourdough we make downstairs in my bakery. So natto, it's also easy to get in the Japanese supermarkets here. So I think in Asia in general, it's pretty easy to get these authentic, real fermented foods, not just people adding the flavor into these foods. So I guess that's the one caveat. Just be careful what you get, and it's in fact fermented.
Yeah, I think it can be a bit tougher here in the US. I think yogurt is a pretty solid choice. You can make yogurt at home too. Most people, I don't think they do, but you can buy a yogurt machine or yogurt maker that keeps the mixture at a consistent temperature and just make it yourself. You can read up on it. It's not too difficult. But yeah, you can do that. Kombucha is pretty easy to make too. I guess the only thing I would look out for is the sugar. Like there can be a lot of sugar in it. So just watch out for that when you make it. And you can get a SCOBY, like the mother or the base of the kombucha pretty easily. Like I think I got mine just off of Amazon. Like I think I just ordered it on Amazon and in a package. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so you could make kombucha. But yeah, I would just watch out for things like I guess like chemically made fermented food. So they're not really fermented, but it's like artificial, like just to make it sour, that or just to
Mm-hmm.
the taste there. A lot of like sauerkraut isn't actually fermented. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like flavored. And so yeah, like a sauerkraut would be a good source, but just make sure it's actually fermented. Um
Yeah,
but
sourdough too. There are a lot of fake sourdoughs.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I guess that's fermentation. And do you want to talk a little bit about sprouting and like the different like things that you've used to sprout or like to bake bread with?
Yeah, it's much more difficult to do this sprouted grains here in Taiwan. I know that in the US, there's that Ezekiel bread, which is
Yeah.
pretty popular, and so they do try to sprout those. I sprouted some buckwheat, or just some wheat, and so the wheat kernels. But then it's difficult to melt those and make them into flour. So generally, I don't do a whole lot of that in the bread. But we would sometimes try to sprout some seeds, red beans, green beans, and you can cook red bean soup or green bean soup if you really want to have some beans and legumes and so forth. You can
Hmm.
try to sprout those before you cook them and still pressure cook them for a long time to break down the lectins inside. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so these plant toxins, sprouting can reduce some of that. Soaking can reduce some of that. So usually we'll try to soak for at least 6 to 8 hours, and then
Hmm.
dump the water to get rid of some of the saponins. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah, even things like quinoa. Quinoa is actually very high in saponin. So
Hmm.
you want to definitely soak that and sprout that if possible.
Hmm. Yeah, and so I guess you could say that the like sprouting foods or fermenting foods is a natural way of like processing them a little bit and almost like neutralizing these like compounds and these like chemical defenses that these plants and the seeds have just innately built in. It kind of neutralizes them or can like process them a little more. So like these vegetables or legumes can be more easily digested. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, so because that's why we would try to choose some fermented and sprouted foods. And her fourth pillar is fresh food. And so I think that this largely encompasses like eating local foods and eating seasonally. And so this would be like trying to source from, I guess, just like source local foods and eat the foods that are in season at, at any given time. And could you talk about a little bit about like why we would do that?
yeah. Genetically, that also makes sense because we heard about the concept of circadian rhythm, right, on the daily cycle, but our body also has these longer seasonal rhythms. So if we are eating fruits and vegetables that are in season, I think your body tend to process and tolerate that, and also it will naturally have these feast and famine cycles. And these natural cycles as well as stressors allow our especially the metabolic function to stay flexible. So sometimes during summer you can consume more fruits because that's where naturally, especially the local fruits, because they'll be more ripe. And they generally will be sweeter, and so your body can learn how to use carbohydrates efficiently. But in winter months, you naturally reduce the amount of these carbohydrates, and so your body kind of go into a slight carbohydrate deficit or a bit of a famine mode, and learn how to use store fats, metabolize fat more efficiently. So that natural cycle will allow our body to remain metabolically flexible, which is what we want. So I'm not always staying ketosis, so you can have these cycles. So that's why eating local and seasonal is important. Also, genetically, I think where you are from, you're probably more suitable in terms of eating the plants that are in that region. Though that may be a less, I guess, a smaller impact or less of a factor, since we're so genetically diverse nowadays, because we travel, But in terms of the seasonal cycles, as to food and carb availability, I think that does make a difference.